Hey, joining me right now is Chuck Penner of Leftfield Commodities, based out of Winnipeg. Chuck, how's it going?
It's going great.
You know, I want to start with soybeans, Chuck. For the last year, we focused so much on soybeans and the cloud about shipments to China and how that possibly, in the oilseed complex would impact canola prices. Canola, of course, now has its own black cloud. But it seems when I look at new crop beans for November, we've found resistance to that 925 or about 934 and 3/4 right now. Have beans kind of found a bit of a bottom here right now, do you think?
Well, that would be nice. When I look at the soybean chart, I'm looking at it more, more as a situation where, we've had a bit of a firmness that's been in place for, in the nearby contract anyway, going back to last harvest. And it's kind of been that way even on the NOV contract. Since last July of 2018, we've kind of been firming up. And then we got to about, where are we here? We got to about beginning of February, and that upward momentum right around 970 on the NOV soybeans kind of seems like we've hit that resistance, and we're working lower from there. My big concern on soybeans and frankly even on canola too isn't so much this current situation with the trade blockades, if you want to call them that, but it's that whole African swine fever thing, which I think is giving China the luxury of shutting some of these things down, some of these imports down, and it's a situation that isn't going to be resolved probably in months. It could end up going into years and become worse yet before it gets better. So, I'd love to be friendly. The other day I was at a farm meeting and I was talking, and it was on International Happiness Day. And so somebody suggested I could make them happy if I talked about $12 canola, but it just isn't in the cards. And so I'm more nervous or cautious or conservative, whatever you want to call it, that the upward momentum that's kind of been there in the bean market is now tipping over, and we're going to start testing new lows, well below that 925, or it could get uglier again yet.
Well, the Prime Minister today, when he was speaking in your hometown, Winnipeg, he did have a bit of a Freudian slip. He did say, we're working on this over the next several years, and what he meant was, and then he's like, months. So yep. he did slip a little bit there.
Well, we could resolve the thing. To me, the best possible resolution would be that U.S. and China come to some sort of an agreement, and part of that agreement is the release of this executive that's sitting in her $1 million mansion in Vancouver. Mm-hmm. And if that was part of it, it would take things out of our hands. We wouldn't have caved. But at the same time, the issue goes away. And so, that to me is the best possible resolution. But even if that happens, again, Chinese demand isn't going to bounce back. In fact, it could slip further because of this African swine fever thing.
Fear of that south of the border as well. And as I look at the futures on the grain side, red across the screen today, except for rough rice, which I'm sure a lot of our audience is not exactly that interested in. But definitely a negative tone to that market. And, we got canola hovering in that, depending on which month you're looking at, in the 450s.
Yep.
It's been tough for farmers to watch this.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, to be honest, it's been, canola's been weakening since the beginning of, or even before the beginning of February. And so this latest news, if you want to call it that, was simply a recognition, or somebody in the mainstream media finally woke up and went, oh, there's a problem here. But really, those shipments have been slowing down for, according to the people I talk to in the trade, they've been slowing down for a couple of months already.
Yeah.
And so, it's been already tipping over the canola market long before that, last Friday's $15 drop. And so it was just all of a sudden, it hit the news. We had that sharp drop, then Monday bounced back a little, and then today again it was looking ugly. And so the news has controlled the last little bit, but really it was already moving in that direction, well before that.
It's interesting. You bring up the relation of all this to ASF. And so we've been hearing that we know how devastating this is. There's been so many head that have been destroyed. So we got a tragic situation with ASF. What China's been doing is this allows them, they're not going to need as much meal to feed the pigs. Then at the same time, they're also reducing the incorporation of that meal into the ration because they were feeding a lot higher rations of these proteins to the pigs in comparison to North America, is my understanding. So it's like a double whammy, using a terrible situation and making it their advantage. That's an interesting way to look at this.
Yeah, there's probably something in the Art of War book that deals with soy meal, but I haven't come across it yet. But yeah, and if you want to know the worst case possible scenario, is that swine flu spreads across a larger number of countries in South Asia, East Asia, and,
here.
Here. But so like that's the worst case scenario, and that's when the not just the soy market, but corn and feed wheat and everything is in trouble. Then let's hope we can contain it and not let it get worse.
It is interesting though when you look at the lean hog futures, and I'm not sure how closely you're following them, Chuck, but you look at the June 19 future, and it's had a really strong run in the last month. We're up 26%. In the last month.
I don't follow it that closely, but yeah, the idea, of course, and I'm sure you've covered this already, is just that if China is growing less pork of its own, then it's got to buy a bunch from largely from the U.S.
Okay, so let's go through a scenario here, Chuck. We've been asking people, will they cut back their acres of canola? I think it's a little bit too early yet. I wouldn't necessarily be jumping on that. 55% of people said in our poll on realagriculture.com that they are holding at their current acreage. I thought that would be a little bit higher. If people do end up switching out, which is possible, learning from the Durham situation last year with Italy, what about pulse crops? What does that market look like if some of these acres switch into pulses? Or do we have enough demand there to sustain a little bit more acres than we originally had planned?
A little bit more. I'm hearing a little bit as well too about guys switching. I've had some phone calls from a few people, asking about switching to. It's either you said maybe it's too early. It might be too late actually. To do a whole lot of switching. Some of the people I talked to said, they've already got their nitrogen down and so on and so on. So yeah, you can go into a cereal, but pulses are kind of off the table if you're going to be. Switching out of canola, pulses aren't really your best option. But that said, I think maybe the pea market might be able to take a little bit more, a few more acres. Lentils really not so much. And my concern is a little bit is some of these other, even smaller special crops like mustard or canary seed or things like that. It doesn't take much. It doesn't take many canola acres to really swamp those markets as well too. And so, in those ones, I've said, if guys have asked me about switching from let's say, from canola to mustard, well, then you may want to make sure you've got some pricing locked in because, if there's more than just a few of you doing that, it could turn into a bit of a rout too. Boy, I'm just Mr. Cheerful today, aren't I?
Yeah, you're. It's great. It's been great chatting with you. But realistic, right? Realistic. Like, and you think about peas. Last year, one of the things that saved us on peas when India put up their annoying tariffs because of the fumigation it was China, right?
Well, that was one of the things. Was probably the only thing that saved our hide on that one. Yeah.
Yeah.
So again, if they want to get sticky on that yet too, boy, and flax could end up in the same boat, and barley could end up. Although barley, we can feed lots of it here, but that's those are the if you want to get to the worst of the worst cases, that's where it goes.
You know what? Honestly, if we get into a domestic campaign where we're encouraging everybody to drink more Canadian beer to get through all this malt barley, I'm sign you and I up, Chuck.
Absolutely, I'll do my bit.
We will do our bit. Hey, Chuck, thanks a lot. I really appreciate it.
All right, John.